Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope everybody's doing well. Okay, so today is going to be a pretty interesting video. We're going to be going over some stuff that's coming out of the UK and Europe in general, and it's pretty fascinating and it's pretty uplifting, so that's pretty exciting. And before we do, though, I want to remind everybody what the national security strategy that was released in December of last year, I believe, what it said about Europe. So let's look at that really quick. Okay, so promoting European greatness. American officials have become used to thinking about European problems in terms of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. There is truth to this, but Europe's real problems are even deeper. Continental Europe has been losing share of global GDP, down from 25% in 1990 to 14% today, partly owing to national and transnational regulations that undermine creativity and industriousness. But this economic decline is eclipsed by the real and more stark prospect of civilization erasure. See that right there? The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union. So we're talking about the rules-based liberal international order, which I did make a video about, which I will put up here, and all the problems it's caused, and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self-confidence. And that part right there is extremely important for what we're about to go over. Should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. As such, it is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and military strong enough to remain reliable allies. Many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. We want Europe to remain European, to regain its civilization self-confidence, and to abandon its failed focus on regulatory suffocation. This lack of self-confidence is most evident in Europe's relationship with Russia. European allies enjoy a significant hard power advantage over Russia by almost every measure, save nuclear weapons. As a result of Russia's war in Ukraine, European relations with Russia are now deeply attenuated, and many Europeans regard Russia as an existential threat. Managing European relations with Russia will require significant U.S. diplomatic engagement, both to reestablish conditions of strategic stability across Eurasian landmass and to mitigate the risk of conflict between Russia and European states. It is a core interest of the United States to negotiate an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine in order to stabilize European countries, prevent unintended escalation or expansion of the war, and reestablish strategic stability with Russia, as well as to enable the post-hostilities reconstruction of Ukraine to enable its survival as a viable state. Now, we don't need to continue reading this, and I will link this below, but I think that's all we really need for now. And one of the reasons why they're bringing up Russia is because it is costing Europe so much money to fund the Ukrainian war. And if they would just stop doing it, the war would end pretty quickly. It's like a waste, and there's a myriad of issues going on with all that, which I'm pretty sure I've spoken about before. But let's go. Okay, so what I want to get into now that we went over that is we're going to watch some videos together. Okay, so the first one we're going to watch is Secretary Marco Rubio's remarks at Munich Security Conference.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, The Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike.
So remember how my thesis has been that a lot of our issues go all the way back to the world wars, and then even more so after the Cold War and all the stuff that got put in place and all the just the corruption, because that's why in the ancient intelligence espionage video that I made, which I'll put up here in this on the screen, I put in there a portion of a video where it talked about one ancient spy intelligence agency from India, the India area basically. And that whole thing, it talks about how because of the vast intelligence network, the country had become so corrupt, because when you're doing all this dirty handing, really like evil, criminal, bad stuff that the CIA gets up to, that's going to come back on you as karma on your country and make your country corrupt and blah, blah, blah. So I think, so that's just sort of like an esoteric sort of view, but I go even deeper into a lot of other things about that. The issues that are going on with Russia and Ukraine technically go all the way back to the end of World War II, because Russia lost 27 million people in that war, which is pretty crazy. Okay, that's a lot of people. And I know they don't tell us about that and they don't talk about that. And Russia calls it the Great Patriotic War. But they were very concerned over Germany being rearmed again, and they wanted security guarantees. And that's sort of why they kind of like took over that half of Germany to keep weapons from being closer to their border and such and such. And that is what they have been talking about all this time ever since then, because they made deals with America that America didn't keep, where the NATO wouldn't move eastward and that they would maybe even be able to join NATO, or that NATO would be turned into something else and they would be part of this other security thing they were putting together. And if you paid any attention to what Russia says all the time, over and over and over again for decades, is we have security concerns. We need security guarantees. Can we have diplomatic talks? Can we like work this out? And they just keep getting ignored and treated horribly. So all this goes, there's so many things that when you break it all down, it all goes back to like that time period.
We found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe. One with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. At the time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain. But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocks were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole.
Hey guys, so it's that time where I need to ask you to subscribe to the channel. And if you're already subscribed, just hit the like, please. If you don't do this, I will be abducted by aliens. Thanks.
That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it an evil empire. And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world.
Okay, so I don't know if I have specifically talked about the end of history issue that's going on. So I know I've talked about blank slate theory in the video I did on the rules-based order. There's this other thing that sort of goes into that, which is this thing called the end of history. And it's really fascinating because these are the mindsets that our ruling elites that are in all these institutions have that's really messing up stuff. So let me Okay, so let me read to you what this is. So the end of history refers to a political and philosophical concept suggesting that humanity had reached the final stage of ideological evolution, with Western liberal democracy becoming the universally accepted form of government. This is most closely associated with Francis Fukuyama, who popularized it in his 1989 essay, The End of History, and expanded it to the 1992 book, The End of History and the Last Man. Now, this guy was very popular in the political circles at the time when the Cold War came to an end and the Berlin Wall collapsed and all that stuff. He was a thinker that all of our ideological elites took from. I'm pretty sure he wrote for and worked for think tanks, and so he was influenced by he influenced the Bushes, the Condoleezza Rices, the people in Europe, the liberals that took over in Europe, etc. And he might have worked for the administration, but I don't know. He argued that with the collapse of communism and the end of the Cold War, liberal democracy had triumphed ideologically. He believed that no viable alternative political system remained, marking the end of large-scale ideological conflict. For Fukuyama, this did not mean an end to events or problems, but rather the end of history as a progression toward new political systems. Because liberal democracy was seen as the final stable form of human governance, the concept draws on the philosophies. Now, what have I said about philosophers and that they're dangerous and all this nonsense, right? The concept draws on the philosophies of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Okay, that's important. Dialectics. Karl Marx. Marxism. It is in everything. I am telling you guys, it is in everything. And this other guy can't pronounce his name. Particularly the idea that history is linear progression toward a final rational state. However, the thesis has faced significant criticism since events since the 1990s, including democratic backsliding, the rise of authoritarianism, global terrorism, and reinsurgent nationalism have challenged the notion that liberal democracy is now the inevitable endpoint. Okay.
This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves.
Okay, and so I talked about that in my video about the liberal world order and about how we have, and I wrote about it on Substack too, I believe, where we have given away our moral authority to these bureaucratic institutions that were put in place after the world wars, and that they have been corrupted. So like in the beginning, maybe it wasn't so bad, but it probably wasn't a very good idea. They've been corrupted and they're all gone crazy.
This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why.
Okay, so one of the things he's talking about here is the concept of a nation state. Okay, so I have gone over this before, how it's important to know what things are. Okay, so we are going to go over what a nation state is because it's extremely important for what we watch after his speech here. So let me pull that up. Okay, so I have this pulled up and it is for kids, but it was really honestly the best one I could find on Quick Notice that explains what a nation state is, because of course people are trying to spin that too. So all right, imagine a country where most people share the same culture, language, and history. That's pretty much what a nation state is. It's a type of state, a country with a government where most people belong to one nation, a group of people with a shared culture, language, or background. So a nation state means the government and the main group of people live in the same area. Okay, so it's a group of people with a shared culture, language, background. So a nation state means the government and the main group of people live in the same area. This is different from older types of countries. So back before there were nation states in ancient times, there were city states wherein a group of people who shared the same culture, the same ethnicity, the same background were in one area with a main cultural hub that was the city, with agricultural and basically countryside around that city. Okay, here's a new people, an ethnic minority from Japan. Okay, these were the people that were there before the Japanese that are there now. I've learned about these people. It's actually kind of fascinating. All right, what is a nation state? And that's why you have the Cherokee Nation. That's why you have these things, because they are a nation, because they're the same ethnicity, culture, language, background. A nation state is a country where the people living there mostly share a common culture, language, or ethnic background. The government of the state rules over this specific territory. The idea is important because it connects the idea of a nation, a group of people, with a state, a political area with a government. Before nation states, many countries were empires ruled by kings or emperors, and they often included many different groups of people. So yes, you had the city-states, then you had also empires. Examples of nation states: Iceland, Japan, Portugal. Iceland, the people in Iceland have their own unique culture and language. Japan is often seen as a strong example of a nation state. Most people in Japan share a common Japanese culture. However, Japan also has smaller groups of people, and it lists those. Portugal. Countries before nation states: the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, the French Empire. Okay, so after or shortly before the World Wars and after all the revolutions sort of took place and they disposed of monarchies, that's when the nation state idea came into being. So let's go back to the video.
We Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive, because the two great wars of the last century served for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions, they are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia, it is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself. And finally, we can no longer place the
It's like really bad. It's gotten really, really, really bad.
so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international
Amen. Say it louder for the people in the back.
cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice.
Okay, so why that matters for actually Europe is because the drug trade that comes out of Venezuela, actually, most of its drugs don't come to America. That's different countries that do that. A lot of their stuff gets shipped overseas to Europe. So,
In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world. And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable. Because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy. It will restore to us a clearer sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster. They gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain. And our largest and most...
So I saw something too where, like, I guess AOC, I don't even know why she was here, but like made fun of him for saying that. It's like, how stupid are you that you don't know that that's where all that type of stuff came from, was Spain, the horses and all that stuff. Like, how can you not know stuff like that? It's unbelievable to me that you could be that stupid.
Iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields, from Kepyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends. We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over, the future is inevitable, and our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, I want to go to this video here. Okay, so just this last week, this guy, Rupert Lowe, who is he's a parliament minister, like a MP, a minister of parliament, and he did the R-word gang inquiry because the government wouldn't do it. It's like this really big thing in England that's been going on that our liberal world order wants to completely ignore because they don't want to be called racist and they don't want to inflame race stuff, just like how I explained in my heuristics video that I did on how that's what was going on in Minnesota, that they knew the fraud was going on. I showed that. And then they got actually sued for being racist and Islamophobic and had to pay the lawyer fees for that. And so they backed off and they just let the fraud continue to happen and grow worse for like several years until the federal government recognized it. And that was just in one case when I went and looked up the fraud stuff. So Same thing that's going on here. They're just letting this happen to all these poor young women, and the stuff that's coming out, and girls, little girls and stuff, and the stuff that's coming out of this inquiry that he did is like the worst, most horrendous stuff I've ever heard. Anyway, so then because there was this thing going on in England where people are fed up with all this mass immigration. I don't know if you are aware, but about 1.5 million people come in, just like nonstop flooding in for decades now, into just England, which is a very small country. It's not very big, and it's just causing a lot of problems, and it's getting worse. And I was actually really getting really worried for them. And along with several other people, it's been like a topic, and a lot of young men have been stepping up over the last several years and trying to do whatever they can. And so this guy joined Reform. So there was this whole thing with Nigel Farage, and like he was going to be the guy who was going to help Europe help the UK get back on its feet and do the right thing. Then it became pretty clear that it was the same status quo going on, and he was putting in all these politicians that have just overseen the failure of all this for so long into his party. And so this guy who was part of that party broke free from it. They tried to like have him arrested. And that's another thing. In Europe, or in the UK, they're trying to do away with jury trials, if you can believe that. They're arresting people for social media posts if they call out the stuff that's going on with the immigrants and the crimes and stuff like that. If they call them out, they're getting arrested. That's what Marco Rubio was talking about, and that was censorship. And that's what that document that I read at the beginning was talking about. The people who get arrested for that stuff get extremely long, like years and years long, prison sentences for social media posts, whereas the R-worders and other violent crimes and even M's, they get barely any time. So it's really crazy. It's getting really, really, really bad there. And so this guy broke away from Reform, and he just announced the other day that he was starting his own party called Restore Britain. This is the first speech he did after announcing that.
The national political landscape. I've thought long and hard about what I'm going to say to you, and I've come to a stark conclusion. There is simply no other way. This is the only choice. You elected me to Parliament in 2024. The good people of Great Yarmouth elected me. Not for 1 second in Westminster have I forgotten that. I am here to represent you and your priorities. You sent me there to fight for change, not to
I'm going to speed it up.
do things how they've always been done, not to accept more and more relentless decline. You sent me there to try and fix things. And I have tried. I've honestly tried. And it almost got me sent to prison. I've used every tool available to a backbench member of Parliament, and more. Parliamentary questions, committees, motions, speeches, petitions, everything and anything. Sometimes we succeeded. More often than not, we haven't. The system simply will not shift. But we have tried, and we've tried again, and again, and again. And nothing has shaped my thinking more than our crowd-funded independent inquiry into the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. An inquiry that should never have had to exist. An inquiry that I created only because the political system itself would not act. That inquiry has been the most sobering experience of my public life. Not just because of the awful crimes, not just because of the horrific suffering, but because
The inquiry that he did showed that the authorities and the people in charge of, making sure that type of stuff doesn't happen or punishing it when it does, completely ignored most of it because of not wanting to be racist or Islamophobic, et cetera, et cetera. So they just let it happen, just like in Minnesota with the Somali fraud stuff, which I talked about in my heuristics video.
of what it exposed about the way this country is governed. Again and again, we heard the same story at our hearings over the last fortnight. Warnings raised, concerns logged, evidence submitted, and then nothing. Nothing happened. Not because people did not know, but because acting would have been difficult. Because acting would have caused controversy. It would have inflamed racial tensions. It came with personal and professional risk. It would have meant being labelled an Islamophobe or a racist. So people did nothing. They let the abuse continue all over the country. Even worse, many officials were even involved in the rapes themselves. We must call it what it is. It was, and still is, to this day, the rape of Britain. They can call me Islamophobic, racist, or whatever else. Emily Maitlis did so. Let me be abundantly clear with you tonight. I do not care.
I guarantee you that they're going to call this man a Nazi. They're going to call up the words fascism and Nazism and all that. I guarantee you.
I would rather be labelled a racist than to enable rape. Our inquiry will not just talk. We are going to act. A target list is already being made of rapists, police officers, social workers, council officials, politicians, and NHS employees. We will take out private prosecutions and civil litigation. We will be relentless in our pursuit. Our aim is very straightforward: to put people in prison. I reached a point, sitting through evidence, listening to survivors, reading documents that should make every public servant hang their head in shame, and it became impossible to ignore the bigger truth. The problem is not confined to one department. It is not confined to one policy area. It is not confined to one political party. It sweeps through the entire governing culture of this country. A culture of risk avoidance, a culture of reputational management, a culture of endless consultation and permanent deferral. A culture where process matters more than outcome, where responsibility is spread so thin that nobody is ever held accountable. That is why I've come to this conclusion. Britain does not need tinkering, minor reform around the edges, not carefully curated cosmetic changes, just this time with the same failed ministers wearing a turquoise rosette. It needs restoration, full-scale restoration. A restoration of courage, a restoration of responsibility, a restoration of a political culture that exists to serve the public, not simply protect itself. I tried to work within the system, and I will continue to fight inside Parliament. But I can no longer pretend that the existing political structures are capable of delivering the scale of change this country now needs, and at the pace that is now required. The will is simply not there. That is why today I am launching Restore Britain as a national political party. At the next general election, we will put forward hundreds of qualified candidates from outside the existing political establishment. They will not be failed ministers. They will not be politicians. They will be men and women who have succeeded in their own fields and want to deliver a better Britain. This will be an entirely different way of doing politics. Restore Britain will be the national umbrella organisation, and we will work with local parties to deliver local priorities for local people. Great Yarmouth First will be the pilot. Our sister party, based here in Great Yarmouth, focusing purely on implementing local change. We will run a joint ticket at the election, and I will be the candidate here in Great Yarmouth once again. I hope other local political parties will come together and help us to fight for a better Britain. If we can get this right, we can transform British politics forever, forging an entirely new way. I simply could no longer justify asking you to place your faith in a system that has repeatedly shown It cannot or will not fix itself. It needs a serious programme of national restoration. And that's exactly what Restore Britain is being built to deliver. First, immigration. Restore Britain will not manage mass immigration. We will not just stop mass immigration, we will reverse it. Illegal entry will mean detention and removal. Not years later, not after endless legal paralysis, all funding the parasitic legal profession, not after being absorbed into a permanent asylum industry. If you enter this country illegally, a Restore Britain government will remove you within 24 hours of arrival. If you are living in the country illegally, you will be detained and you will be deported. They must all go. This is absolutely non-negotiable. Restore Britain would abolish the entire asylum system. No more asylum seekers. The scam will end. We will round up every third world criminal who has broken into our country, and we will remove them. Without compensation, without delay, without apology. Do that, and the boats will stop overnight. Restore Britain has already published the most comprehensive deportation policy ever produced in Britain. We are now seeking the power to implement it. Legal immigration will almost come to a complete halt. We will close off entire visa routes from countries which are proven to provide us with criminals, sex pests, and illegal migrants. Zero immigration, net zero immigration, is weak, weak, weak. It is insufficient, and it is too late. The barbarians are already in the gates. For the foreseeable future, far more people must leave Britain than arrive. A country simply cannot survive without shared expectations and a shared culture. Language matters, contribution matters, respect for our law matters. All of that matters. If a foreign national is living in Britain and unable to speak English, refuses to work, claims benefits, lives in social housing, hates our way of life, or even wants to do us harm, then they must leave or be made to leave. I make no apologies for saying this. Millions must go. Welfare. We must always protect British people who genuinely cannot work. That is our moral duty. But the current system has completely failed. It is stagnant. It writes people off. It traps people. It teaches too many people that dependency is far safer than ambition. Restore Britain will rebuild welfare around participation, rehabilitation, and expectation. If you can work, you must work. If you can train, you will train. But if you are able and repeatedly refuse to engage, you will lose your benefits. Restore Britain would remove access to benefits for every single foreign national living in Britain. They would lose access to universal credit, social housing, disability benefits, everything. It will all go. If you are a guest in our country, you will support yourself. If you cannot do that, then you must leave. I make no apologies for saying so. Now, to the economy. Because Britain is strangling itself, suffocating, dying, we punish effort. We punish risk-taking. We punish small business. We punish productivity. We punish success. It must all change. We regulate endlessly and then wonder why nothing gets done. Restore Britain will slash taxes on work and enterprise. Income, dividend, corporation, VAT, stamp duty, thresholds, For all these must rise, and tax must fall. We will scrap IR35. We will double the VAT threshold. We will burn down the regulatory frameworks that crunch small businesses. We will end the HR culture that paralyzes and blackmails employers. We will restore long-term policy stability, because businesses cannot invest if the rules change every year. Farmers cannot plan if policy shifts with every consultation. Manufacturers cannot expand if planning and energy frameworks remain incoherent. We will back domestic energy production. We will back the reindustrialization of Britain. We will back British farming. This is a national restoration programme, because the deeper problem in Britain is not only financial, it's cultural. We have slowly lost confidence in ourselves as a nation. We've become reluctant to defend the things that used to bind our society together. Restore Britain will be unapologetic about this. Britain is not simply an economic zone. It's not just a collection of institutions. It's not just a legal jurisdiction. It is a nation, a people, a home, our home. With a shared culture, shared history, shared expectations. Restore Britain will openly recognise the Christian heritage that shaped this country's moral and civic foundations. Responsibility, duty, restraint, forgiveness, and most importantly, fairness. These values created a high-trust society. We must support parents as the primary decision makers in their children's lives. We will protect family life. We will support British men and women to raise their family in a country they are proud to call home. We will restore that high trust culture. We will uphold one legal system, one rule of law, one standard, no parallel justice, no religious exceptions. British law must remain supreme. Restore Britain will end the creeping Islamification of Britain. Halal and kosher slaughter will be banned on British soil.
I really hope that that happens. It's so horrible what they do when they do that kind of harvesting of the animal. It is so, I don't know if anybody has ever seen it. I probably can, it's probably not even allowed to be shown on YouTube, but it is so bad, horrific.
The burqa will be outlawed, and Sharia courts will be made illegal. Unfettered immigration from Islamic countries will end. Britain is a Christian country, and under Restore Britain government, it will remain a Christian country. We will govern with confidence. We will not apologise for wanting Britain to remain cohesive and to remain British. Restore Britain is not offering you a miracle cure. Our programme is serious and honest. It will require discipline, it will require courage, and it will require, most importantly, patience. And it will require the willingness to accept short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term national restoration.
I like how he's not saying like, oh, this is easy, like promising things that are, not able to do, like saying this is going to be hard work, this isn't going to look pretty, this is going to be difficult, is, I think, important, and being truthful.
Because it will be painful. Difficult decisions will have to be taken. But I will always be honest with you about the extent of the task ahead. But let me end where I began. I'm not pessimistic about Britain. I would not be standing here if I were. This country has the most extraordinary people, the best people on this planet. with incredible skill, decency, and intelligence. What it lacks is the leadership prepared to act for the long term and tell the brutal truth about what we will require in the coming months and years. So today is the beginning of a necessary journey, and I ask you to help build it, to help restore competence, confidence, and national purpose in British politics. Because Britain is our country, it is our people, it is our home, and it is now our collective responsibility to restore it. Thank you.
Okay, so I saw his ad, his Restore Britain ad that he put out when he announced. And then I immediately went and checked with the people that I follow. For English stuff, I follow a couple of people. And so I immediately went to see what they were saying because this is really exciting, right? And so let's go see what was up with some of them. We're going to start with Carl Benjamin from his account is called Sargon of Akkad, and he also has Lotus Eaters podcast, which is a pretty interesting pod. It's like a network.
Just checking things on the back end. I'm pretty sure I'm live.
I have to speed up too.
Right. Okay. Been a pretty interesting couple of days, isn't it, folks? So I just
Oh, and so the name of his video is "We Are Going to Win," and the thumbnail says there will be a Shire with like laser eyes of that Rupert Lowe guy.
just want to preface this stream by saying that my wife had surgery yesterday, and so I've been looking after the kids for 2 straight days, and so I am personally exhausted. Not because there's anything wrong with the kids or anything, it's just I'm just trying to make sure they're not constantly causing trouble, and I have a massive pounding headache, and I wasn't going to do a stream tonight. I haven't done a video for Cat Daily. I wasn't going to do a stream tonight. I was going to get an early night because I feel fucking shattered, because she's obviously recovering, and I'm just absolutely shattered. But people kept asking me, you can do a stream, you can do a stream, you can do a stream. And then eventually Morgoth was like, you can do a stream. I was like, fine, I'll do a stream. We're going to win. We're going to win. You can feel it in the air. You can, the ley lines are all lining up. You can feel it. It's just all of the correct energy is coming into alignment. All of the right people are freaking out. All of the wrong people, well, I say the wrong people are freaking out. Everyone was just like, finally. It was like a dam bursting. And it's been 1 day, and already you can feel the difference. They know they're fucked. So it begins with this from a couple of days ago now, like yesterday. It was a couple of days ago this was recorded. And this was such a great little clip that Connor's posted it here, but it's been going around, right?
Who would you like to see being PM? PM?
Yeah, Prime Minister.
Rupert Lowe.
I love this so much, right? I love, like, look at him leaning in. This is a revolution, right? I'm sick of it. I bet this guy was excited when Farage joined Reform, became an MP for Clacton. I bet he was excited. I bet he was like, finally, we're going to get something done. And then Farage starts filling the party with Muslims and Tories. Literally, a Bangladeshi Boris Wave migrant gets to become a councillor, but for some reason, my guys get kicked out of Reform for saying things from the Reform Party's own manifesto.
So I don't know if everybody is aware of the way that the English system works, but Tories are what are considered the Conservative Party, but the Conservative Party in England is basically like a moderate leftist party here in America, and then the Labour Party is more slightly left of that party, and then they have the Greens, which would be like far left. So there's really no right party there. But Nigel Farage was supposed to be like this great hope, and he had ran on a lot of really good things, and he put together the Reform Party, and then he just like started being crazy and going against everything. And so that's what I was sort of talking about.
Both Bo and Dan got deselected and kicked out of the fucking party for just saying things that were in their manifesto or had been something that Farage had said in his speeches. What? Oh, it was so infuriating. And then, obviously, Zia Youssef buys his way in with 200 grand, and then he starts just bringing in loads and loads of Tories, 27 ex-Tories, including some of them who were literally part of the fucking Conservative government that brought in the Boris Wave. And I'm sorry, Robert Jenrick, but you were the immigration minister in that time period. And it's just like, okay. So Farage has got a large body of working class people, a lot of them in the north, a lot of them ex-Labour voters, and he's like, here's this lineup of Tories, lads, get voting. It's like, yeah, I don't think that actually that's what people were asking for. And Farage has been playing a very strange game, a very strained game, in which he is at the top of a very thin ivory tower, and essentially, Farage has been running Reform as if he is an Ottoman sultan. It's Farage and Zia Youssef, his vizier, his worm tongue, and then a great distance between him and massed levies, basically peasant recruits. And for some reason, he has left an entire army of veteran campaigners not just at his back, but in many cases, like, cast aside on purpose. People who are very intelligent, very well read, very politically switched on, whose careers involve politics, and who have been doing this, in some cases, for decades. And he's like, yeah, well, I don't need those guys. I have my peasant army. And it's like, okay, that's great. But you've literally left a massive company of free men who are angry at you at your back. Do you think that these guys, that's us guy, by the way, folks, do you think we're not going to do something? Do you think we're just like, well, I guess Sultan Farage has figured this out. I know he's dipping in polls at like 29% on average now or something like that, when he should be well north of 40. But Sultan Farage and his army of peasant conscripts from like Jane from accounts and bloody Bob from marketing that he intends to just pluck up and dump in seats to do nothing while he does what? Struggles personally, individually with the system? Is this going to work? Is that the way to victory? Is that the Western way of victory? And people aren't happy with it. And so look at this guy jutting out his chin. I want Rupert Lowe. That's who I want. Because on the other side, right, you've got Farage with this incredibly narrow range of ex-Tories and the trail of bodies he has left in his career. And on the other side of that, you have Rupert Lowe, who seems to be, as far as anyone can tell, as far as I can tell, a really successful businessman, really popular man, just gregarious, popular, like everyone seems to really like him, and a faithful family man and grandfather. He's been married for 40 years to the same woman. He's still as happy as the day they got married, and they've got kids and grandkids, and he's got his business, and he's got his farm, and he donates his salary to Great Yarmouth, a charity in Great Yarmouth, every month. He donates his monthly salary because he has made himself independently wealthy. And on the other hand, and then you just compare that to Farage, who, when he was at ARC in 2024, he was like, yeah, we've got the slogan, family community country or something like that. And he was on stage going, well, I know I haven't been the best example of that. It's like, yeah, no, you had affairs with like Alex, whatever face is, that broke up your marriage, right? Like you are a Jack the Lad, right? You are a Jack the Lad. And it's fine. Don't get me wrong. I bet Farage is phenomenal to go to the pub with, but people aren't actually happy with how he's running his party and what the potential future is going to look like. But moreover, everyone can see the trail of bodies that he's left, the trail of murder victims that he's left on his rise to the top. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's something about this that just isn't sticking, right? I don't think he's actually against the system. I don't think he's outside of the Uniparty. He seems to be reassembling the Uniparty under a teal banner. And that's actually not what people want. And so a lot of people, myself included, have been on it, Rupert Lowe, going, you know you're going to have to, don't you? You know it's going to have to be you. And if you got Island of 5, which of course you can't get now because it's sold out, you would have read Rupert Lowe's interview that we had in there, where he says his favourite historical figure from British history is Cromwell. I mean, he named his dog Cromwell. So it's one of those things where it's like, right, okay, we've got the guy, right? He's the man. He's the guy. And when this came out, I mean, look at the number of views on this. 21.5 million views. I forgot to get something. Let me just grab something quickly. I did bookmark it, though, because I think it's really worth showing the distinction here in excitement, right? So this is Rupert Lowe. Says, look, I've decided to start Restore Britain as a party, so you can join it and we can, a national political party. When Nigel Farage, back in 2024, said, yeah, okay, I was going to swan off to the United States, but actually, Reform were about 13% of the polls, because remember, they began at like 1 or 2% of the polls. Richard Tice had kept the thing alive for long enough for the situation to get so bad that they were looking like a viable protest vote, right? And when the Clacton polling came back, and Reform were at 31%, something like that in Clacton, and they looked like they were going to win, Farage yeeted whoever the poor guy was that was going to get that seat, didn't compensate him, by the way, screwed him over, of course, and then said, yep, okay, I'm the new leader of Reform, and I will be standing in Clacton. I got 1.5 million views on Twitter. 1.5 million, that's not that many, actually. It's actually not hard to have a tweet that gets 1.5 million views, especially when Farage himself has got like 2 million followers. Rupert's 21.5 million views in a day. I mean, this only went up yesterday, about 2 hours, so 26 hours, 21.5 million views. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Like, guys, this has hit a real nerve, right? Like this has absolutely struck a chord. And so I was watching this all sort of breaking yesterday. And so I watched the video, and we'll watch it together because it's an incredible video. Incredible. We'll talk about it, because why wouldn't we?
I have chosen to speak to you today from the farm, because places like this represent what proper Britain is about. Hard work, responsibility, effort, duty, stewardship. This is the England...
See, that is just exactly what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. Look at what Rupert is not saying here, right? He's not saying, I'm going to make your life easier, right? Effort, duty, stewardship. This is the proper right-wing framing. This is what Jordan Peterson was always appealing to, and I'm sure that didn't affect how Rupert has pointed this out. But the point being, this is what Jordan Peterson is saying. Look, people want to be offered responsibility, and they will rise to the challenge. And that's what Rupert is offering. That's what he is suggesting. We are the custodians of our country, and we should act like it. It's such good framing. And of course, he does own a farm. He legitimately is a farmer, as well as all the other things that he does. So it's completely right. You know, when Farage does his walking around the countryside in his wax jacket, his barbel jacket, what they call him, like, that's an aesthetic. But this is actually Rupert Lowe's lived reality. Remember when Farage backstabbed Lowe, and they made up a lie that he threatened to murder Zia Youssef to try and get him arrested and thrown in jail? The police went and not only did they arrest him, but they also confiscated his guns. Because Rupert Lowe has got like half a dozen shotguns and rifles, because on a farm, you have to shoot foxes and maybe shoot deer or whatever, you know, pests. You actually need guns. And so they took his guns for like months until he got them back. And, you know, you need these things. These are tools when you're working on a farm. So, like, just saying, for Rupert, this is not an aesthetic. This is real. This is how he lives his life, which is just, you can see the night and day difference. Where Farage is pretending or play acting at the thing, this is genuinely how Rupert lives.
Stewardship. This is the England I know, and this is the England that I love. On a farm, you don't think in election cycles or headlines or polling. You think in seasons. You think in generations, in what you leave behind to those who come after you. And that's why, here on the farm, I am now launching Restore Britain as a national political party. I'm now going to dedicate my life to finding, organising, funding, and providing hundreds of qualified candidates to present to the British people at the next general election. This process has already started, with invitations being issued to patriots in aligned political parties, Reform, the Conservatives, the SDP, Advance, and more. In local politics, we will work in partnership with localised political parties, such as Great Yarmouth First, that have the best interests of their residents at heart, combining our forces at the next general election. The men and women standing for Restore in that election will not be politicians.
Just pause there because my nose is starting to run for some reason. But that's so great, isn't it? It's so great to hear. Like,
It's so good how happy he is. He's so happy.
Fucking sick of politicians. I'm just so sick of them. Like, professional politicians. I mean, this is the problem with the Labour Party, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, Keir Starmer, he wasn't a politician. Well, I mean, that shows because shit. But also, he kind of is, right? You can't say, I'm a professional human rights lawyer and I was the director of public prosecutions and I got made Sir Keir Starmer. And you're like, oh, that guy's not political. No, that's an entirely political office, actually. His entire job is to politically change the legal landscape of the country. I do want, though, some people who are actually not politicians, but accomplished in other realms of life. Like, one of the things that's just maddening with Farage is that there are loads of, like, economists who support Brexit, but you wouldn't know it because he doesn't have any of them around him. Like, you wouldn't know that there were loads of, like, you know, like the Weatherspoons guy, Tim, what's his face? Why isn't he a part of Farage's advisory team or something like that? Like, there are accomplished businessmen who know how the country ought to be run and are literally, I mean, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but I know the problems that we have running businesses in this country because I fucking run a business. I have a business of my own, and my God, do I know the problems with overregulation and fucking taxation and business rates, and I'm not going to go on about that, you know what I mean? Like, there are real people who have real knowledge of how really the world and this country works, and Farage is like, yeah, I'm going to take Zia Youssef, a concierge. I'm going to take, like, Nadine Dorries, Boris's primary cheerleader, and the first thing she did was say, hey, we should get Boris in this party, guys. Like, I want to throw Boris. I'm not going to Fed post, but I don't want Boris, right? I actually don't want Boris. I actually don't want any more of these slimy politicians whose only job is to win elections through guile, through fraud, through legerdemain, through sleight of hand, and then to give me nothing. To give us nothing of what we need. To just completely sell us out. I mean, Boris has a classic line that was leaked years later. Open the floodgates because I want the Financial Times to like me again. And my God, man, my God, I'm so fucking sick of it. I'm so sick of it. I don't want professional politicians. Like, we have so many lawyers in politics. It really bothers me. Because actually, I don't want a country ruled by lawyers. There are loads of fucking lawyers on both sides of the aisle. And it's like, look, I would rather someone who has real human experience in some other endeavor of life. And we can just hire some lawyers to write or draft.
On in the United States as well, everybody that goes into Congress, senators, whatever, they're all lawyers. They all went to law school.
Or repeal or whatever, to do the dog work of repealing the laws that are standing in our way or adding laws that we absolutely need, right? We don't need lawyers in charge of things. We don't need professional politicians. What we need are people who are actually invested in the country itself and not invested in manipulating and gaming the system so they get a comfortable retirement, a comfortable parachute out of it. Like the bloody, what's the Lib Dem guy? Who's in the coalition government? I swear to God, I've hardly slept in the past couple of days. It's going to come to me. It's going to come to me, right? But the point is, I don't want politicians either. And this, brilliant. This is a country that is full of very smart people, very committed people. We don't need them. We need a completely fresh slate. So Nigel taking like dozens of ex-Tories who are just like, oh yeah, well, we fucked this up. So, okay, why would you get another chance? Nick Clegg, that was it. Thank you. Becoming the like the head honcho of Facebook in this country. Like, where's Rishi Sunak gone? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want this, right? I don't want this. We need people who are just directly connected to the country itself. And this is what he is offering.
I promise you that. They will not be failed ministers. They will not be tainted by failures of the past. They will be from business, from the military, from science, from medicine, from education, from industry, representing real communities up and down the country.
one thing that you should probably want as well is for them to be standing in the constituency in which they live. I realise, I'm not saying this is what he's going to do. I don't know, but it's one of those things where I swear to God, what we should do in this country is prevent the ability to do what Americans call carpetbagging, just to parachute candidates into constituencies. So say, oh, we've got a safe seat and we want that guy to be in Parliament, therefore we parachute him in. He doesn't have to live there and he can just win the safe seat. That's got to end, right? That is actually a cancerous way of running democracy. No, you have to run in the place where you live, and we can have it so you've got to have lived there for more than 5 years. Say, have 6 years, so you can't just jump in before an election cycle and then be like, yeah, hey guys, look, I happen to have bought a house in this place and therefore I'm from here. No, you've got to have lived there from at least 2 election cycles before you can run, or something like that. Just something where it's like, no, we want you to actually represent the country and not be, oh, I don't know, Goldman Sachs banker Rishi Sunak, you fucking prick. Sorry. How fucking dare you? How fucking dare you get parachuted in to Richmond, an ultra-safe Tory seat? I mean, on the plus side, at least there are no safe seats anymore for the Legacy Uni Party. There's nowhere that's Conservative or Labour that's a safe seat. All of the Labour front bench are going to lose their seats in the next election, by the way. All of them. All of them. Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, well, she's not front bench now. Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, like all of them. All of them. David Lammy, probably actually David Lammy will keep us. But the rest of them, waxed. They're all fucking done. And so it's just like, it's so good, man. It's so good.
Every single one will be from well outside the existing political establishment, and every single one will understand the difficult decisions that need to be taken.
Perfect. I don't want insiders from the political establishment. And everyone's like, oh, well, they have experience. So what? No one was like, well, Tony Blair hasn't got any experience. We're not going to elect him. He got a massive majority, even though he had no experience in government. Most people who are elected to government actually don't have experience of being in government. Like, this isn't something that is actually, necessarily a good thing, because they've got experience of selling the fucking country out. Like, I don't want that. I want genuine outsiders, genuine rebels who are going to be like, oh no, this system is cancer. This system is destroying the country. And that's how you know Rupert Lowe is the only person who is a genuine rebel against the system and recognizes that it is the system itself that is the problem. And so what we're going to do, we're going to fucking destroy it. We are going to tear it down piece by piece. And this system we can call the UK, YOOKIKAY. And every fucking party these days is like, restore UK, change UK. No, the UK is the Blairite project that has been brought about through British values. Well, I'm sorry, it's destroying our country. I like the idea of restoring Britain to what it was before Tony Blair took over. Yeah, when we actually were Great Britain and not just the UK. Fucking UK. Fuck the UK. We are taking this back, folks. We are taking this back.
Because there are no easy fixes. I'm not going to tell you comforting lies about the condition of our country. I have only ever been honest with the British people, and I will be straight with you now. What is necessary will be incredibly painful. But for the first time in a very...
That is so fucking refreshing, man. It's so refreshing, because it is going to be painful, right? It's going to be difficult, and there will be suffering along the way. There will be suffering. This will be hard, and it will hurt. And we have been in a position where the sort of anesthetic politics of the managerial state, which is just to ameliorate all kinds of inconveniences. Oh, but what about the two-child...
Remember we talked about the managerial state, that's what, what's his name? That thinker, Paul Gottfried, called the way the rules-based liberal order was all set up and everything, that it's a managerial state ran by bureaucrats that don't really care about any one thing, and they're very ideologically captured.
Benefit cap. Oh, there are some single mothers who are now in poverty, and that's going to be... Well, whose fucking choice was that, right? Whose choice was it? They made the decisions. Why do I have to be the one who pays for it? And it's like that with everything. Oh, look at these poor Afghans or Iranians or whatever who invaded our country on small boats. You don't even want to know what I think should be done with them. Like, I'm not in any way interested in ameliorating the discomfort they have in the situation. I'd personally have them flogged. Like, so fuck them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm for hardship. I'm for suffering. We are going to go through it. It's going to suck, but it has to be done. Like cutting out a cancer, you have to have an invasive surgery. It's just necessary. In order to get back to something that is a respectable, decent, prosperous, optimistic country, we are going to have to do some brutally invasive surgery, and it's going to hurt. There isn't any anesthetic for this. This is going to be rough, but we have to become the men and women who can take it on the chin and say, no, this is the right thing. We are going to do the right thing. That's all we have to do. It's just going to be difficult. And there are going to be all sorts of communists and backsliders who are like, oh no, oh, but I can't. Oh, no, we can and must. We absolutely must do this, because if we don't, we are condemning our children, grandchildren, and all of our descendants to hell. And we are the last generation that is in a position to do this without significant bloodshed. Frankly, we are the last generation to be in a position to say, no, we have the demographic might to do this democratically, to do it lawfully, to do it without violence, and to do it right. We are in that position. And if we don't grasp the nettle on this, if we don't actually make the effort and take responsibility for the state of the world that we live in, future generations will never forgive us. They will never forgive us. They will damn our memories, and rightly so. Absolutely rightly so. So no, I love this. I love this framing so much. This isn't going to be easy. It's going to be painful, but it is necessary. We are not promising you ease. We are not promising you comfort. We are promising you hardship. A long road. But at the end of it, glory.
very long time, voters will have a genuine alternative which is truthful with them about the scale of what now has to be done. The first priority is to control who comes to our country, and more importantly, who stays in our country. Restore Britain will not just stop mass immigration, we will reverse it.
That is a killer line, isn't it? Because I was thinking, yeah, okay, what you want to do is have quite a hard line anti-immigration slogan, right? So not one more, end all immigration now, something like that. And it's like, well, Rupert's decided, now that's not strong enough. we assume we're going to stop it, but they're going home. They're going to go home. And what does this do? Well, this puts Rupert in a league of his own. This is the Trumpian strategy. Rupert Lowe, his slogan, we are going to reverse mass immigration. Millions are going home. Well, I mean, what does Keir Starmer say to that? Oh, that's horrific. What do the Lib Dems say to that? Oh, it's horrific. What does Zach Polanski say to that? Oh, it's horrific. You're a racist. What does Nigel Farage say to that? Oh, no. It's not my intention. I don't want my name attached to mass deportations. Farage sits comfortably shoulder to shoulder with the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, and the Green Party. All of them will be on the other side of this issue, and Rupert Lowe occupies the actual right-wing space. He is the only person in the country who is publicly pledging his party to mass remigration, sending the people who shouldn't be here home. And so they're all going to denounce him. They're all going to say, no, that's beyond the pale. That's terrible. And Rupert has, again, the Trumpian advantage here because he doesn't care. He doesn't care what they think. Whenever Nigel Farage is challenged by like Beth Rigby or Peston or whoever on Sky News, yeah, I mean, sorry. I mean, like, for example, the thing with Jim Ratcliffe, right? Where he's like, well, I mean, it's going to be difficult, but like, we're being colonized. And Farage came out and said, yes. But I mean, you're not ready for that yet. He said yes, but then he backs down from it when he's challenged because he wants the interviewer to like him. Whereas Rupert Lowe doesn't give a flying fuck about their opinion. And you saw this in the Emily Maitlis interview, which is amazing. Just holds his ground. He's like, no, this is what we need to do. I don't care about your liberal pieties on this. This is the way it has to be. And so it puts him in that Trumpian position where it's like, I don't care about your opinions. This is what I think is right, and I'm the one who decides it. And this is the difference between Rupert and Farage. Farage having this kind of Jack the Lad, man behaving badly attitude around him means that he wants to be liked by the people who are calling him Nazi. Whereas Rupert Lowe has brought a kind of patriarchal authority to this conversation. I'm the moral arbiter. I'm the one who sets the moral paradigm. I'm the one who tells you what is right, not the person that you are now interrogating and trying to get on the back foot. And it's so refreshing and so important. And it's one of those things that Farage has just never been able to step up to, put his chin out and just say, punch. I don't care. I don't care if you call me a racist. I don't care if you're trying to shame me. I don't care. This is right. And Rupert Lowe has just begun on day one on that position. Like Farage spent his entire career unable to get there. And Lowe begins there day fucking one. Just amazing. This is...
Okay, so you heard him. This is it. This is it. We're going to win. Okay, so now let's go check out... So Connor Tomlinson is another guy I listen to for information out of the UK, and his videos, the choice has never been clearer. And I believe he actually wrote some of the policies that Rupert Lowe is using, so he's pretty connected into all that. So let's see what he has to say.
The choice being offered to British voters has never been clearer than right now. Because as Nigel Farage was announcing Reform's shadow cabinet comprised of Richard Tice, Zia Youssef, and two Tory defectors, Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, he was asked a question by a reporter about Rupert Lowe's new Restore Britain party. And he used this answer to justify Zia Youssef calling the police on Rupert Lowe under false pretenses, which could have landed him in prison because Nigel Farage disagreed with Rupert Lowe on the need for mass deportations.
You know, people think, oh, Farage has done it. We'll just set a party up. It'll be marvellous. We'll sweep the next election. It just isn't as easy as that. Now, does he have a profile on X? Yes, he does. You think I'm going to support him? Probably. But you see, when he stood up and said that we've got to consider the mass deportation of entire communities, including those born in the United Kingdom, that just moves way beyond the point of reasonableness, of decency, of morality. And that was the moment at which, I realised we just had to get rid of him, and get rid of him as quickly as we could. And I think in terms of the way we dealt with that, we were probably more brutal than the other parties. But you know what? That's the way it's going to be. Thank you.
I'm not shocked by much in politics after 5 years, but this had my jaw on the floor. Nigel Farage thinks not only is it necessary, but justified to banish Rupert Lowe from the party, subject him to a HR witch hunt on the grounds of bullying investigations against his staff, to brief to the press the lie that he is suffering from dementia, and then not just treat Zia Youssef's false police report, and it's false because there was no evidence that Rupert Lowe threatened to kill him. He filed it 3 months after the supposed incident, and the Crown Prosecution Service and the police, who are so eager to imprison any right-winger they can for a meagre tweet, couldn't find the evidence to actually bring charges against him. Not only did Nigel Farage think that that was a blunder he wanted to move past, no. He thought it was, yes, more brutal than what other parties would do, but in the end, it was worth getting rid of Rupert Lowe using that method because he disagreed with Rupert Lowe on mass deportations. Remember, Nigel Farage wrote in the Telegraph shortly after Lowe was exiled that mass deportations was a dark and dangerous use of rhetoric. He since reversed his position, under duress from pressure leveraged by Rupert Lowe, yes, myself at Reform UK Conference in 2024, but of course, that Stephen Edgington interview, clips of which follow him around like a bad smell. But do you now trust Nigel Farage to execute mass deportations? Because not only is he saying that he banished Rupert Lowe because he believes that deporting people who were born in the country is a step too far. So filing false police reports in order to politically assassinate someone you disagree with in your own party is morally justified. But saying we should deport people who have committed crimes, who were born in the country, is a step too far. Not only can Farage now not be trusted to deliver mass deportations because of that flip-flopping, but also he has appointed Zia Yusuf as his shadow Home Secretary. Zia Yusuf would not just be another Muslim Home Secretary under reform, another Muslim Home Secretary set to supervise the Home Office, which has been ideologically captured by a 700-strong Islamic network who think that monitoring jihad is Islamophobic.
Okay, so the Home Office is a really big problem in England because they make a lot of the policy and they've got a lot of weird rules that they put on the MPs where they can't make anything political or call out certain things, etc., etc. It's sort of like our bureaucratic industry in Washington, where the people that we don't even elect or see are really the ones behind the scenes writing the policy, making the rules, doing X amount of stuff, and they don't really leave with the elections. And so the Home Office is an interesting apparatus in the way that Great Britain is ran, like, or the English Parliament.
I think that monitoring Islamic terrorism is racist and Islamophobic, and that's words straight from the mouth of a Muslim civil servant whose own brother and school friends joined ISIS, but also who have continually frustrated mass deportations and migration restriction, who have sought to frustrate the process of prescribing Palestine action as a terrorist group after they shattered the back of a security guard with a sledgehammer and damaged military aircraft. Not only that, but Reform UK would put Zia Yusuf in charge of the police, because the police come under the jurisdiction of the Home Office, especially after the abolition of police and crime commissioners, which Reform are committed to do. Do you want Zia Yusuf as Home Secretary when he called the police on Rupert Lowe to politically assassinate him? Because that's what you're getting if you're voting Reform. Remember, this is what they did to Rupert. They showed up to his home in the evening, raided his house, confiscated his shotguns, all because of the false accusation he had threatened to kill Zia Yusuf. Because, as Farage has revealed, he just wanted him out of the party. He had to get rid of him. And as Rupert says, if they did it to him, they'll do it to you too. This is unconscionable, unacceptable. And, as well, from Farage, an outright distortion of the truth regarding what Rupert had actually said. Now, Rupert, of course, has responded to this to defend himself. He says, Farage has just made an important admission. He said, it was when I started talking about mass deportations, it was the moment he realised he had to get rid of me. What did I actually say that Farage felt he had to get rid of me over? The following position. I stated that if communities of foreign nationals knew their husbands, cousins, or brothers were industrially raping vulnerable white girls and did nothing, then yes, they should all be deported. Dual nationals involved in the rape, then yes, they go too. We must revoke their citizenship and remove them from the country. And he points to the horrific findings of his privately funded rape gang inquiry, which he did as an independent MP through a crowdfunding platform, whereas Nigel Farage committed to doing the same thing and never followed through on it. He points...
Yeah, so he had to raise the money himself to do the inquiry because nobody would do it.
The findings that he single-handedly uncovered, which we will go through in a moment, as to the reason why these people shouldn't be here. And here's what Rupert actually said in Parliament during his speech on the rape gangs. Will the government commit to deporting all guilty foreign nationals involved urgently, including family members who were aware of the crimes and therefore complicit? Wives, sisters, mothers, and cousins, if they knew and said nothing, are just as guilty as the rapists themselves. Will the government commit to stripping citizenship from dual nationals implicated and deport them as well? Race or religion must protect nobody. Will the government commit to pausing all Pakistani visas and foreign aid into the country until the Pakistani government agree to accept any of their deported citizens who have perpetrated these crimes on British soil and imprison these rapists and their accomplices in Pakistan however they see fit? The choice is clear. Reform UK refuses to deport the perpetrators of the Pakistani rape gangs and the family members that knew about the crimes and covered up for them. Whereas Restore Britain and Rupert Lowe advocate for doing just that and pulling every economic and diplomatic lever they can to ensure that Pakistan takes its racist, rapists, and their enablers back. Restore Britain have responded. Here's my friend Charlie Downs saying Farage, for once, has decided to tell the truth, and he's right.
So Nigel Farage has just admitted that the reason he threw Rupert Lowe out of Reform and reported him to the police was because he supports mass deportations. It was nothing to do with bullying or death threats to Zia Yusuf. Farage alleges that we want to deport entire communities, and he's absolutely right. A Restore Britain government would deport every last foreign rape gang collaborator, wives, brothers, sisters, cousins, who knew about the rapes but chose to do nothing. Following our inquiry, it could not be more clear that this is the right thing to do. These crimes are an open secret in these communities, and if Farage is not prepared to grapple with this reality, that's on him. But trying to ruin Rupert Lowe's life because he is absolutely disgusting. And if you're a member of Reform, ask yourself whether you want this man, who is now flanked by the likes of Robert Jenrick and Nadeem Zahawi, running your country. And if you don't, join us at Restore Britain.
There are those of us who were encouraging Reform to do better because they have been consistently topping the last 200 opinion polls, especially since the general election. There are those of us who would have held our nose and voted Reform because they were the least worst option or the best chance we had at smashing the Uniparty. I now never want Nigel Farage to step through the doors of 10 Downing Street. Ever. Not just because Zia Youssef will be his Home Secretary. That is a promise as of today. Not just because Nadim Zahawi would be his Foreign Secretary. Notice how they held off announcing that, but I know for a fact he was going to be announced as their Foreign Secretary. And I think it's after the launch of Restore Britain, Nadim Zahawi being Foreign Secretary for Reform would have confirmed all of their base's worst fears about them becoming the Tory Party 2.0. It's because Nigel Farage has just justified trying to put his political opponents in prison because of a disagreement over mass deportations, a policy he's now promising. How is Nigel Farage any different from Lord Hermer? You know Lord Hermer, the Attorney General of Keir Starmer's government, who signed off on the incarceration of Lucy Connolly, the wife of a Conservative councillor thrown in prison for an imprudent tweet following the Southport massacre. Now, Lucy Connolly should never, ever have been put in prison. Neither should Wayne O'Rourke or Peter Lynch or all of the other people persecuted because Keir Starmer decided to call grieving parents and members of Labour's Red Wall far right. But Lucy Connolly at least had the thin pretext of sending out a tweet that the Crown Prosecution Service and police distorted to imply that she was inciting violence against asylum seekers and politicians. Rupert Lowe did no such thing, and Nigel Farage has now admitted that there was no substance to the police complaint filed by Zia Youssef. The story about Rupert Lowe saying he was going to slit his throat or shoot him was just a thin veneer for a political attack to excise Rupert Lowe from the party. So, Rupert Lowe was persecuted by the police, had his home raided, his shotguns taken, his staff subjected to a HR witch hunt, for far less than Lucy Connolly. And Nigel Farage did it. Zia Youssef did it. And these men can now never be in power. And the choice is clear to our old friend Danny Finkelstein, because, as Charlie Downs has pointed out, if you want a second-generation migrant, Zia Youssef, who tried to get Rupert Lowe thrown in prison on false charges, in charge of immigration and policing, Vote Reform UK. And Mr. Finkelstein has said, I wonder if Restore Britain might assist Nigel Farage. Their insistence that Britain should not be for second-generation migrants born here, like myself or Zia Youssef, and is and will strike most people as being an extreme position that allows Farage to position himself against it. So Nigel Farage is positioned against deporting anyone who was born in Britain, no matter their behaviour. And he is for Zia Youssef calling the police on Rupert Lowe. But why is Rupert Lowe, Charlie Downs, myself, why are we in favour of deporting people who were born here if they commit heinous crimes? Because Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry has revealed the most heinous crimes that have ever been committed.
Okay, so this is going to be like, extremely rough to listen to, and he doesn't go into like the way even worse things, and there's going to be, I think, a document that's released or whatever eventually, but it's just a fair warning.
In Britain, that were covered up in the name of political correctness, anti-racism, and maintaining community tensions. Because the mass immigration and multiculturalism project could not survive the bad PR that would have resulted from being honest about the Pakistani rape gangs operating in more than 55 towns and cities across Britain and trafficking girls overseas as sex slaves. For example, one survivor told...
And this is still going on today too, by the way. And also, they send out ads overseas to entice men to come to the UK or to Britain to literally, like, they'll have ads showing like, oh, you can have, you know, relations with these young white women, and then they get them to come over. So a lot of the guys are actually coming over with the expressed mindset that they're going to be able to do that.
The panel, since she was 13, she was raped by probably 600 or 700 different men over 3 years. Another said she heard lots of stories from Western women where their children had been kidnapped and they'd never been seen again. Western women had been married, gone to the Middle East, and their children had been taken. So there is a sex trafficking trade happening in the UK, transporting girls to the Middle East and Pakistan, because they've been married off in Islamic marriages and then transported by their rapists to their family and clan or buyers overseas. There were girls locked in dog cages, drugged out of their mind, being transported around by the rapists. Other girls were brutalized and tortured with objects like Coca-Cola bottles, keys, and a baseball bat. One girl had a plastic bottle full of boiling water inserted inside her. I've heard even worse. One girl testifies to girls at a children's home, so orphans, the abandoned, the abused, being lined up like a slave auction by the owners of the children's home and sold off to Pakistani men. One mother explains that she was warning the police that her daughter was going to be abducted by the gang, taken back to one of the rapist houses and abused. The police then handed her daughter over to the rapist. So social workers, children's homes, police officers, local councillors, MPs, and even members of the House of Lords were complicit in this abuse. And there was a major conspiracy of silence, not just by the authorities, but by the local community, to ensure that the press and politicians did not speak up or act on the worst scandal in British history. The industrial-scale drugging, kidnapping, trafficking, raping, torturing, and even murdering of white, working-class children because they were white. I mean, some of these crimes are just unspeakable, unconscionable. I spoke to some of the people running the inquiry, and they weren't sleeping, and they weren't even the people that had to endure this. But they sat there for hours, listening to testimony from parents, survivors, people who blew the whistle and were silenced for it. And the perpetrators are the people that Nigel Farage's party are promising they will not deport, because they think it is more immoral to deport someone who did these crimes that you can see on screen right now that I can't read out. They think it's more immoral to deport someone who did this because they were born here than it is to call the police on Rupert Lowe because he advocates deporting them. The choice is clear. And it's not like it's ambiguous as to which community perpetrated this. There were men from other nationalities who were involved in the gangs because of their shared Muslim faith. But survivors time and time and time again told the panel, they've told journalists, they've told inquiries, that their abusers were Pakistani men. Families, clans, county lines, drug gangs that were bound together in a conspiracy of silence, in solidarity, because of their ethnicity, and preyed upon the children because they were their ethnic outgroup, because they were white, because they were Kafir, because they were English. And what about Rupert's claim that there were families that knew about it and covered it up, that entire communities are therefore complicit in the crimes? Well, in 2013, when a group called Together Against Grooming tried to get imams to read out a sermon denouncing the rape gangs, there were members of mosque congregations that shouted the imams down and demanded the sermons not be read. We've already heard Oxford Imam Dr. Taj Hargay for the last decade or more speak out and say there are multiple mosques across the country that preach sermons that say Muslim men will go to heaven if they rape English children, because these girls are easy meat. They are nothing more than the chewing gum on the bottom of your shoe. You can mistreat non-Muslims, Christians and Jews, and members of your ethnic outgroup, according to the principle of Asabaya, and you will still be rewarded for it. This is what the mosques are teaching. This is what the community believes. And so it's no wonder that at a trial in Rotherham in 2024, when 7 men were convicted for raping children, Mohammed Siab, one of the perpetrators, who heard his sentence through an Urdu interpreter, waved to his family as he was taken down for it, and one of his daughters shouted out, "I love you, Dad." They heard what he did to children their age, and they still supported their father anyway. And the families, when some of the perpetrators were re-sentenced and had their sentence reduced, rather than being given the death penalty, which would happen in a just country, one survivor was attacked by the families. A relative of one of the rapists was dead-eyeing her in the court. Outside of the court, one of them said, "We should slap the bitch," and National Crime Agency officers and court security had to intervene and separate the groups. We've also had other family members TikTok livestream their relatives while they're in prison and deny all the crimes, despite there being abundant evidence they committed them, and accuse the girls of lying, as well as releasing personal information about the survivors who the press have had to deliberately keep anonymous, because as soon as these rapists leave prison, they merge straight back into the community without any punishment. If you knew someone had abused a child in your family and your broader friendship network, I think we'd never talk to them again. That is not the case in Britain's Pakistani communities. And that's according to members of the Pakistani community who themselves are outliers and have been courageous enough to speak out about this and have said, yeah, there's a conspiracy of silence going on because they hate white people. And I have to give credit here to Yasmin Alipai Brown, who herself is a raving Guardian-writing leftist, who
Okay, so when you see Asian, there was this big push. I don't know when it happened. I think like the 2010s, maybe 2000, maybe the early 2000s, to switch it to calling them Asian. So when you see Asian, they're not talking about like Chinese, Japanese, what we would normally think of as Asian. They're talking about Middle Eastern people, just so everybody knows.
Back between 2011 and 2017, was writing honestly about this. She was interviewing the wives and mothers and sisters and daughters of rape gang perpetrators and asking them for their opinions. And although these women are often abused by the gang members themselves, they fail to have any sympathy for the white victims because they're white and not Muslim. For example, Yasmin encountered Suju, the wife of another jailed groomer. She was afraid of him, but she too thinks that white girls are, quote, filthy, how they dress, they have no shame, no fear of Allah. Was it okay to hurt them the way they did? Yasmin asked. No, she said. You can't hurt people. Allah does not want that. But it is the girls who should be careful. They did something to him, the perpetrator. Maybe bad magic. I am now alone, no money, no life. They believe that English children cast some kind of spell, possessed their husbands, brothers, cousins, and sons with some sort of jinn, robbing them of their responsibility to not sexually abuse children. They blame the girls for being white, for not being Muslim, and for showing more skin than a niqab or burqa would allow, and therefore tempting the men, as if the men have no responsibility to exercise their own impulse control and not sexually abuse children because they're children. We have to live with these people, according to Nigel Farage. These people, by the way, the majority of them do not work a day in their lives, and so their very presence in our country is subsidised by the British taxpayer. They're living on benefits. They're living in social housing. And this is their opinion of your children. And Reform thinks it's more disgusting to deport these people than it is to call the police on Rupert Lowe. As Yasmin wrote in the Times in 2016, within too many Asian families, white females are disrespected and despised, and the intolerable is tolerated. This form of cultural supremacy excuses and validates appalling offences against outsiders. None of these people should be here. They don't have to be here. It's completely optional. And this is not a persecution on ethnic lines. The rape gangs are a persecution along ethnic lines. The cover-up of the rape gangs by the family members are a persecution of us along ethnic lines. We are just judging these people by their behaviour. And their behaviour is so appalling, ubiquitously, across the community, either by perpetrating the crimes or willingly covering them up out of a sense of ethnic and religious solidarity. But yet again, Reform thinks that it would be unjust to expel these people. But they're happy to expel Rupert Lowe from their party for saying we should expel these people. And one of the most revealing comments about how this community thinks was contained in this piece by Yasmin in The Independent in 2011. The criminals feel they did no wrong, she wrote. These girls to them are trash, asking to be wasted, unlike their own women who must be kept from the disorderly world out there. The conversations can be heard every day around dining tables and on streets. They are embedded in thought and language. Yasmin once interviewed the mother of a man who had been convicted of repeatedly raping his young wife, who came from a rural village in Pakistan. The head of the nursery school the couple's child attended had helped the victim report what was happening. In Urdu, the mother hissed, "How lucky was she to get my son? The dirty, ungrateful bitch went to a white woman to complain. They sleep with everybody. She just didn't know how to make him happy. We have thrown her out. She can go on the streets like those whites now. Get these people the fuck out of my country. I don't care if Nigel Farage thinks it's unjust or impolite or anti-British. Get these people out of my country." And then Yasmin speculated. Again, is this the most appalling payback for white racism? Black writers in the US, including Eldridge Cleaver, have written movingly about some of the unconscious, vengeful urges that impel black men to take up with white partners to assert power, sometimes to annihilate the person who trusts them. This is a racial war perpetrated by one group against another. We aren't doing this to them. We don't want to do this to them. We don't want ethnic conflict. We want to live in peace. And that includes people of other backgrounds who are members of our friendship circles and extended family networks. And that's because we judge people based on behavior and beliefs, rather than race or useful characteristics. And by judging these people on their behavior, the entire community is indicted, either for committing the crimes or covering them up. And that's because they hate us. They hate white people. They hate non-Muslims. There was one Rochdale ringleader in 2013 who went on an unhinged rant during his trial saying Pakistanis are the supreme race. This is Shabir Ahmed in 2013, who smiled when his sentence was read out, by the way. During one of the rants in the trial, he said, "We, Pakistanis, are a civilized society. We are the supreme race, not these white bastards," pointing to the police officers. "You will not get a CBE, you will not get an MBE, you will get a DM, a destroyer of Muslims. You were born 1,000 years too late. You effed my community. You destroyed my community and our children, and none of us did that. White people trained those girls to be so much advanced in sex. They were coming without hesitation to Rochdale, Oldham, Bradford, Leeds, and Nelson, and wherever." He said the jury in Liverpool had been taking instructions from Nick Griffin and the BMP, and later pointed to the prosecutor, Rachel Smith, saying, "I curse you at night, I curse you and your family. You will understand," pointing to the judge. "I curse the juries, I curse the media, and most of you bastards, your family will get it. You've destroyed our community. Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Margaret Thatcher, they're all the same. They're all on the take. They are on the take. It's true. They're all bent bastards. It has to be taken by the average people like you and I. They take all the money and we take all the weight. These police officers were peed on by Theresa May. May you be more peed on." Why are these people in my country? Why does Reform UK want to keep them here? And we can get more about the attitudes of the Muslim community from this 2013 Muslim Women's Network report, which, by the way, Nazir Afzal, who was one of the former heads of the Crown Prosecution Service in the northwest of England, who now spent his entire days on Twitter championing the benefits of diversity and downplaying the ethnic and religious composition of the rape gangs, but also Sir Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, when he was Shadow Justice Minister under the Labour opposition in 2013, wrote the forwards for this. So they know, presumably, the contents of this paper, and so they know the attitudes that are endemic to the Muslim community that produce the rape gangs. Well, in this report, young men were interviewed from the Muslim community, and they said about young women, they wear high heels, wear makeup, nice clothes, smell nice, their body language, it's the tone of their voice. We get tempted and they scream rape. They call it rape afterwards just because they feel dirty. Another had a similar attitude. Quote, "The girls want it. They want to have sex with all the lads. They can't get enough. When their partners find out, they don't want them to know they are slags and sluts and pretend they're getting raped because they don't want to get battered." Even the children think this. They grow up to either perpetrate it or conspire to keep it quiet. When now Baroness Gohir and the Muslim Women's Network interviewed the parents of Muslim boys about their thoughts on the rape gangs, they said they feel under attack after being demonized and targeted with terrorism legislation, and that some people were not interested in the subject and not talking about it, especially when they think the victims are a white girl, so it's almost the "it doesn't interest us" attitude. They have zero compassion or moral consideration for anyone outside of the Pakistani community. And the abuse is common. Here is one horrifying anecdote from a young man. Quote, "My mate called me and said, 'Bro, I have a surprise for you, come over to this house.' When I got there, 15 of them were sitting in the living room. My mate told me to go upstairs for a surprise. When I went into the bedroom, another friend was doing this girl. He said she was 20 of Pakistani background. So clearly either drugged or he's lying about her age to keep himself on the safe side. The lads went up one by one and took turns, and while they were waiting, they were calling their mates, cousins, and uncles to come over and join in and show off. Others turned up too, including 2 older men who were taxi drivers who went straight upstairs. One older man said, 'I'm going to call my son over so we can practice on her later,' and later his 15-year-old son arrived in his school uniform. Everyone took turns, and it took 6 hours. I did get concerned and said, 'The girl is going to get broke. Who will marry her?' The girl is not paid, but she gets looked after. She's given food, and the boys make sure she gets home safely if it gets late. This girl is a sex slave. I hope you will understand this. And this is normal. The men in the community know one another, and they know that if they call each other up and say, 'I've got this girl captive that we are gang raping, would you like to come around and have a go?' They know they're not going to get reported to the police by anyone. Most likely, their friends are going to drop what they're doing and come around and participate. And they're all going to have each other's backs. They're going to be silent. They're going to have an alibi. And if it ever goes to trial, every single one of them pleads not guilty because they have no guilt about it. They just want to get away with it." To finish off the anecdote, he says, "There are set days, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but some of my friends don't like doing stuff like that on a Friday because it's Jummah and they have to go to mosque." Out. Out. All of them. There is no ambiguity about the fact that the community knew this was going on and covered it up because of the race and religion of the perpetrators and of the victims. Mohammed Shafiq, who is head of the Ramadan Foundation, and has spoken out about this for quite a while, I will give him credit, wrote in the Daily Mail in 2016, after his own cousins were convicted as part of a Rotherham rape gang. He said the following: "The answer doesn't just lie in inept officials, paralysed with fear in case they're accused of racism. And it's not only down to the corrupt police officers in Rotherham, who turned a blind eye to the crimes, often, it seems, in return for sexual use of Hussein's victims. This happened because the root cause lies in the British Pakistani community itself. The sad truth is that for years, some British Pakistanis have deliberately buried their heads in the sand about these predatory grooming gangs. More than this, they see any of us who try to tackle the problem as siding with the white enemy. But the fact is that while I did not know what my second cousins were doing, others in our community certainly did, and yet they saw fit to sweep it under the carpet rather than helping the victims. Enough is enough. The time has come for British Pakistanis to admit we have a problem.
Okay, so once again, like I said in my heuristics video, is that we're bringing these people over here, and while maybe not all, but enough amount of them are doing crimes and causing problems, and in this case, like, it's atrocious. But in the heuristics video, I was talking about all the fraud. It wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just the daycares. There's like a whole bunch. And I discovered this other fraud that had to do with meals, and it was all coming from the federal government. And when the state found out about it, they tried to stop it, and then they were sued for racism and Islamophobia. They were coached. The perpetrators of this fraud scheme were coached by liberals to sue them and to use racism and Islamophobia as a weapon. And the liberal judge sided with them and forced the state to pay their legal fees, which was $47,000 something dollars. So they just continued to let it happen. And it was only discovered after the federal government realized that that program, which a few years earlier was only like $200,000 something dollars, had gone up to $300 and something million a year. That's wild. You cannot run a country like that. That is literally insane. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the amount of nonsense that's happening now in all of our countries in the West because of these nonsense ideological ideas that are not based in reality of any type of normal human nature. The problems that all of this has caused is so beyond measure.
Nick's point was, these men weren't lone groomers. They weren't misfits on the outskirts of our group. They were at its heart. By day, gangs like these played the parts of fathers, husbands, and sons. They were accepted among Pakistanis as one of the community, and by night, they were something else entirely. They know. The community know. They cover for their cousins and sons, brothers and fathers. They do not admit guilt. They are remorseless after being convicted. And when they leave prison after their far too short sentences, they fold themselves straight back into the community. They can still get jobs, they can still go to mosque, they still have friends and family members who believe they did nothing wrong. We cannot live alongside these people. I do not care if they have British passports, I do not care if they were born here. Everything should be done to ensure that these people are removed from our society, whether they perpetrated the crimes or knew about them, and either did nothing or proactively covered them up. Reform UK now needs to make the affirmative case for why these people should stay in our country. Because if you think it is immoral to deport someone because they were born in Britain or have a British passport, and Restore Britain is saying these people knew about the crimes, they perpetrated them, or they kept quiet because they hated the victims for their race and religion, and we will use every bit of leverage available to us, foreign aid, visas, sanctions, to ensure that Pakistan takes them back, then if Restore Britain are promising to deport them, Reform UK must articulate what possible benefit these people provide to our civilization that outweighs the greatest child abuse scandal in our history, that means it is worth keeping them, because they don't need to be here. Their presence is optional. They should be sent back to ensure that none of these crimes can ever be committed again.
Look, I'm going to be real honest with you guys. If I can't get people to subscribe or like, YouTube will literally send aliens to my house. Do you want me to be probed? I need you to like and to subscribe. Thank you.
Their presence is a policy choice, and at the moment, Restore are adamant that they will make the choice to get rid of them, whereas Reform are adamant that it is their preference that they stay, and anyone who is promising to ensure that they leave are not just vile racists, but deserve to be thrown in prison. Instead, you get the following statements from Reform. For example, Nigel Farage, who knows about all this because he's been speaking about the grooming gangs for 4 years, since 2014 when he was part of UKIP. And instead, after the election, in late 2024, he said the following to Winston Marshall.
If we politically alienate the whole of Islam, we will lose. We'll lose.
So how does one include
We
them?
will lose. By 2050, goodness knows what kind of a terrible state we're going to be in.
If winning means we can't deport the Pakistani grooming gang perpetrators and the families who covered for them and enabled them, and some of whom presumably would have participated in the gangs but just not been caught, then what does losing look like, Nigel? If you are willing to accommodate this, because you don't want to be called mean names by the BBC, because you're afraid of losing the Muslim vote, despite 87% of Reform voters saying they think Islam is incompatible with British values, I would just say, being British, our traditions, our culture, our way of life. If you think that is worthy of accommodation, if you think that to deport those people is more unjust than calling the police on Rupert Lowe, who said we should deport those people, then I want you nowhere near Downing Street. And then there's Matt Goodwin. And it brings me no joy to do this, because I've known Matt for years. But Matt has outright said it is un-British to deport those who knew about the grooming gangs and did nothing. So Matt acknowledges that there are people who knew about the crimes and not only failed to act, but helped cover them up. And he thinks it would be un-British to deport those people.
British people think of themselves as very tolerant, very welcoming. They're not up for like, let's just round up everybody who knew anything about the red gangs. Let's just round them up and put them in another country.
Matt thinks it's un-British if you are intolerant of people who knew about the rape gangs and didn't act because they didn't care about the victims. Matt, I dare you, look in the eyes of one of the victims who wants these men deported, who wants these families gone, who wants to make sure that no other vulnerable children can ever be exploited by these racist rapists ever again. I dare you to look those girls in the eye and tell them they're un-British for wanting those people out of our country. And so we have to talk about Matt Goodwin because he's currently running in the Gorton and Denton by-election, and I previously did a stream where I said he would probably be the most sensible candidate because he has been consistent on demographics. He has said that Britain should not become a minority white British country. He has said that being British is more than just possessing a piece of paper that says you are British, and he has been firmly on the right wing of reform. And I thought he would be a sensible candidate, and having known him personally and him knowing plenty of the lads now involved in Restore Britain, he would be more amenable to listening to our concerns and would push the Overton window while in Parliament, as well as probably going after Hope Not Hate, for example. And then he decided to engage in identity politics and pose alongside Sikhs in Gorton and Denton. Now, I understand, Sikhs are more likely to vote Reform than any other. Well, at least they would have been before Layla Cunningham became London mayoral candidate and Nazir Youssef is a shadow Home Secretary, because the Sikhs in Denton probably don't like the Muslim enclave in Gorton very much. And so it makes sense for him to target that constituency. But if Matt is principally against identity politics, as Reform claims to be, then pandering to a sectarian vote that is more likely to vote for you because they themselves are opposed to the Muslim sectarian vote is still playing identity politics. And people noticed. And people also noticed the aesthetics of Matt Goodwin being surrounded by a bunch of Sikhs wearing teal turbans. And so the anonymous account Basil the Great made a joke saying they are Reform UK, because these are not the aesthetics of representing the indigenous, native, white, working class, forgotten populations of Britain. Instead, it's pandering to ethnic groups and religious groups from the Indian subcontinent. And so Matt Goodwin responded, British Sikhs have done more than most to take on the grooming gangs. Reform wants to keep not only the gang members, but the families who knew about it here. So I can't say Reform's doing much to take on the grooming gangs. He says, they've also done more to help me win a Labour fiefdom than a lot of the so-called patriots who stood rival candidates and enabled the left. I do not like the blatant racism that surrounds pro-Restore accounts. Matt Goodwin fired the first shot at Restore. This isn't as bad as what Nigel Farage said today, but he didn't need to smear by association Restore Britain. So he fired first. And so Restore Britain responded, and Harrison Pitt made a very good point. Sikhs took on the rape gangs because they have a strong in-group preference, and their girls too were often targeted by Pakistani Muslims. White British natives are forbidden the same in-group preferences. If we ever do show them, we get smeared as blatant racists by Reform UK containment merchants. Both Matt and Harrison are correct. Sikhs did do a lot to protect their own children from the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, and it's documented here in Peter McLaughlin's book, Easy Meat. But the problem is, they only did it for Sikhs, as Hindus only did it for Hindus in Leicester, because they have a strong in-group religious and ethnic identity. Sikhism is a very tribal Indian religion, actually forged out of religious wars between Hindus and Muslims in India. And so, because under the rubric of multiculturalism, they were allowed to practice their culture, they were allowed to self-segregate, they were allowed to be proud of their ethnicity, they were allowed to act and collectively bargain for their ethnic group interests without being called racists and having the state crack down on them, they were able to mobilize collectively to defend their children against those who would prey on them for their race and religion. McLaughlin has an entire chapter on the Sikh victims of the grooming gangs, and this was going on since the 1980s. Sikhs started patrols to ensure that Muslim men weren't preying on and abducting their girls and trying to rape or sex traffic them. And he notes, from the earliest years, Sikhs took many steps to try to warn society about this, from creating pressure groups to risking imprisonment, which is commendable. When the police and other institutions would do nothing to stop the grooming gangs, other non-Muslim communities never responded as the Sikhs did, physically attacking grooming gangs. When white non-Muslims spoke of the overwhelmingly Muslim grooming gangs, they were accused of racism and thus marginalized and ignored. Some of this must come down to greater solidarity within the Sikh community, and with them having their own organizations such as the Sikh Awareness Society, dedicated to warning Sikh schoolgirls and their parents. But also the narrative of racism could not be used to sow doubt among Sikhs, the way the left used it to marginalize any white person who spoke about the grooming gangs. Sikhs were allowed to advocate for Sikhs. They were allowed to use violence to defend their own children, whereas when men used to turn up to kebab shops where they knew their daughters had been abducted and were being brutalized by the rape gangs, they were arrested by the police rather than the rapists. As for the girls were arrested for drunken and disorderly behavior or for being prostitutes. It's impossible for a child to be a prostitute, rather than the perpetrators. It was the Sikhs' ability to collectively organize along ethnic, cultural, and religious lines that kept their girls safe. But the broader culture, Parliament, the press, and now Reform UK are depriving the native population of that same right. And unfortunately, importing Sikhs was not without violence either. Now, this was retaliatory to the Muslim rape gangs, of course, but this still led to Sikh gangs and criminals operating in cities where there were high concentrations of Muslims and Sikhs living alongside each other. For example, Peter McLaughlin points out that there is a Sikh gang called Sher-e-Punjab in the north and lists instances of gang warfare in Birmingham. On February the 19th, in 1988, there was disorder in Handsworth, Sikh versus Muslim. May the 21st, 3 Muslims attacked in Soho Road by Sikhs. May 27th, Sikh youth stabbed following the fight at Daytime Disco in Hurst Street. May 30th, violent disorder outside the Milestone Pub. May 30th, and again on May 30th, an incident on Ladypool Road, Sparkbrook, where 1 Muslim received wounds. June the 2nd, Sikh charged for possession of a pump-action shotgun, and on June the 2nd, 24 arrested following a fight between Muslims and Sikhs. And there is still violence going on today. Muslims and Pakistanis had a battle that lasted a month in Leicester in 2022 over a cricket match, because we had imported the ethnic and religious tensions of the Indian subcontinent, and now Reform are leaning on one faction as a ethnic and religious bloc vote to ensure that they can get into power while the Green Party weaponizes the other faction, largely Pakistani Muslims. These people should not be in our country. We should not have pro-Khalistan protests, just like we shouldn't have pro-Palestine protests. We shouldn't have Sikh gangs, just like we shouldn't have Pakistani gangs. We shouldn't have Pakistani Muslim rape gangs or families who would cover up these crimes rather than report them to the police, because they have no compassion for the victims because they are white and non-Muslim. But Reform UK thinks it's acceptable to pander to sectarian voting blocs and to refuse to deport both the perpetrators and the families enabled and covered up the crimes. And so Charlie Downs pointed out that, like clockwork, Reform have resorted to calling Restore racist, playing the guilt by association game that Labour were playing with Matt Goodwin during his Gorton and Denton campaign. And so Matt Goodwin responded to Charlie Downs. I'm just going to pick out a few quotes from this veritable essay he wrote, and I know I want to talk on that. But Matt says, "You and many Restore people around you appear to be advocating blatant racism, calling to not just deport illegal migrants and foreign criminals, which is Reform policy." Well, it's not, because you won't deport the Pakistani grooming gang perpetrators if they were born in Britain. But throw out settled Brits who work hard, pay taxes, and play by the rules. Okay, are the Pakistani rape gang perpetrators settled Brits? Are the families that covered up for it settled Brits, Matt? Because by your definition, being British is more than about just a piece of paper. So what makes the families of the rapists who cover up the crimes so inextricably British that they cannot be deported, Matt? That deporting them would be immoral, according to Nigel Farage. More immoral than throwing Rupert Lowe in prison. He says, "I do not want any part in that. That is not my politics. When I said it takes more than a piece of paper to make somebody British, I was referring to the emotional bond to our nation that Islamists, terrorists, grooming gang members, and foreign criminals reject." Right. So grooming gang members are not British, even if they're born here. But you refuse to deport people if they knew about the grooming gangs, but hold a British passport or were born in Britain. You're not consistent. You're not truthful. And I know you're not truthful, which we'll get into in a moment. Matt then said, "Your ecosystem, Restore, is riddled with white supremacists, anti-Semites, racists, and conspiracy theorists. From where I'm sat, what you're doing looks like a direct rerun of what the National Front attempted in 1979, which your leader will remember. Oh, we're Nazis. Yeah, Restore Britain, and everyone who supports it, Matt, it's just a Nazi. They're a racist, they're an anti-Semite, they should be shunned and ostracized. They're the real enemy, right? The far right." It's funny you say that, Matt, because you don't believe that. And I know you don't believe that. Because you were just calling me, Harrison Pitt, Charlie Downs, Lewis Brackpool, just last year, saying you want us on the front lines of reform, that we're doing impressive work, that you agree with what we say, that we should help you staff your team, even. That we should help you draft your tweets. We've written for your Substack. You've had dinner with us. You've been on our podcasts. So you don't believe a word you're saying. The cowards at Millbank Tower have told you to attack Restore Britain as racist to position yourself as a moderate. But you don't believe that. Just like you don't believe that the grooming gang perpetrators should stay here. Just like you don't believe that these people are really British. And so it's absolutely disgusting that you would use these smears that people have been wrongfully using against you, against not just Restore Britain and the people in your constituency who like Rupert and are holding their nose and voting reform despite what they've done to Rupert, and now many of them will not, I assure you. But it's disgusting you're doing this to men that you know. Like me, like Charlie Downs, like Harrison Pitt, like Lewis Brackpool. It's dishonourable. And it doesn't make you look more moderate or sensible. It makes you look untrustworthy, and it makes your party look weak and frankly evil. The fact that you would justify calling the police on Rupert Lowe when all he wants to do is get entire communities, based on their behaviour, who have covered up the worst scandal in Britain, the industrial scale sexual abuse and torture of children, based on race and religion. The fact that he wanted to get those people out of our country. Your party is now justifying trying to put him in prison for it on allegations of threats of violence that have absolutely no evidence. And knowing Rupert, he's a gentleman, so I don't believe them for a minute.
Okay, so since we went over that, I now want to go to Rupert Lowe's X page and see some of his posts. So let's do that. They will call Restore Britain Nazis. They will label us racist. They will threaten us. It will not stop us. I promise you that. It is now time for the British people to show some courage, some determination, some bravery, and some balls. Don't just sit back anymore and watch your country slip through your fingers. Time is running out, rapidly running out. Do something about it. If you want your country back, then get off your arse and join Restore Britain. It's 20 euros. Legals deported, all of them. Legal immigration should serve one group of people only, the British people. Do you agree? If so, Reform thinks that makes you a neo-Nazi. Abhorrent. It is putting lives at risk. My life. The police are already involved in serious death threats made against me directly because of Reform's vile accusations. Decent Reform members and councillors want no part of this. Join us. Join a political party that is honest, decent, and fair. Local branches and infrastructure will soon be set up. When that is done, help us on the ground. In the meantime, spread the word. Join the party. Tell friends, family about Restore Britain, about what we are trying to achieve, how we are trying to restore Britain. Reform and the rest of the rotten establishment are going to come after us. It has already begun. We will not be intimidated. Join us and we will get our country back. This really reminds me a lot of what they do here with the far right. They label the far right woke now, woke writer, all this nonsense. I don't always agree with everything that the far right says, but there's a lot of people I listen to that are very staunchly right with good moral values that they're trying to misrepresent them, etc., etc. Anyway, Reform's Layla Cunningham labeled Restore Britain neo-Nazi on national television. It is a lie that put our team at risk and led to a serious death threat. She has until I don't know what time that is today to publicly apologize and retract, or we will begin legal proceedings. Restore Britain's policy on lockdown is clear. It was the darkest time in recent British history, a time where our freedoms were trampled over, all in the name of bent science. For some, COVID was a dangerous disease, and the full power of the state should have been deployed to protect those people, the elderly, the vulnerable. Instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars of closing down our economy, sentencing thousands of young, healthy people to death, and ruining tens of millions of lives, we should have protected those two groups, the elderly and vulnerable, with everything we had. If we could shut the country down, we could have had protected those in genuine danger, obviously. Millions of youngsters had years ripped apart from them, lives destroyed for what? To avoid getting a nasty cough. Sweden was right. Tignell was right. We should have followed their lead. A Restore Britain government would take steps to reverse the damage as much as possible. As a direct result of Reform labeling Restore Britain as neo-Nazi on national television, this vile threat was posted online, a picture of me getting shot in the neck, just as Charlie Kirk was. I am furious. Labeling millions of Brits as Nazis has consequences. This dangerous and foul rhetoric is putting my team and I at risk. I am getting the police involved about this threat to my life. Reform and many others need to stop. Now, debate us on our ideas, our policies, our plan for Britain. Do not label us neo-Nazis or racists, because they are going to give some nutter an idea. Quite obviously, that has already happened. A journalist, Charlie Simpson, with close ties to Reform, reported that these Cunningham Nazi lies about Restore are straight talking points from HQ itself. Reform and the rest need to urgently dial down their rhetoric about Restore Britain. It is endangering good and decent people. A Restore Britain government will review and quash all convictions for nonviolent breaches of lockdown rules. Fines will be refunded, apologies issued. We will ensure that nobody has a criminal record for breaking laws that should have never existed in the first place.
What I do want to do, and what I think is absolutely essential, is to protect the interests of those people who built this country into what it is today, who pay their taxes, who live here honestly and legally, and who are being crowded out by mass legal and illegal immigration, which is not helping us, because a lot of the people who've come in are on welfare. They're a cost to our country, not a benefit to our country. And it's time now to get rid of those people who aren't making a contribution, who shouldn't be here. And let's start, as we say, we've been very clear with what we do. We would start with those people coming here illegally. So we'd stop that, we'd detain and deport them. We'd then detain and deport those people who are living here illegally. And then we will move on to those people who are living here, who aren't contributing, who can't speak English, who are on welfare, and actually are a burden to the British taxpayer.
More exciting news for Restore Britain. We hit 70,000 members earlier today. Council numbers already in double figures, a 10% poll, and 10K more members than the Lib Dems. The British people have a party that will fight for them and them alone. Amazing. Those numbers are amazing because this literally just happened a couple of days ago. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go over that with everyone, discuss what's happening. It's pretty exciting. It's enthusiastic. I'm really excited about it. I was getting extremely worried for Britain. I have been talking about it with friends that I'm worried that it's going to end in a lot of violence eventually. Having this come about is extremely uplifting, and I just I don't know, I think it's pretty exciting, something I want to keep an eye on for sure. So anyway, if you guys liked this video and you found it informative, please comment your thoughts, and if you would consider subscribing, I would really, really, really appreciate it. Well, that's the end of that video, and I'll see you next time on The Eclectic Journalist.